Hey everyone, today we're going on a journey deep into the Paleolithic, where early humans carved their stories into the world around them. Before we go back in time, please like this video and subscribe to receive more stories like this and on. The other side, I'd love to know. Tell me where you're watching from and what time is it there. Now, let's travel back to a world long forgotten. Long ago, before the first stones were stacked to shape villages, before the words of humans were carved into wood or bone, there was only the land, the stars, and the fire, in the valley of deep winds, between the roots of ancient mountains and the winding arms of cold rivers, lived a small tribe known as the Eru. They were wanderers, but for a generation now, they had settled beside a wide, slow-moving stream where the fish were plentiful, the trees tall, and the earth generous. They had fire, and that made all the difference. The Uru believed the fire had been gifted to them by the Sky Woman, who lit the stars with her breath. It was said that she had once descended on a comet of ice and flame, planting the first ember into the heart of the tribe's oldest stone. That stone, black and pitted like a dried seed, was called Karu. It sat in the center of the village, beneath a canopy of animal hides, always warm, always glowing. Around it, the fire danced, dot every night. A firekeeper sat beside Karu, feeding the sacred flame with dry wood, bones, and the curled leaves of the fire vine. It was a position of honor, of solitude. And now, the last of the firekeepers was a boy named Tahu. Tahu was only 14 summers old. Curled like smoke, he had been chosen not for his strength, but for his patience. As the last apprentice of old Murad, the previous firekeeper, he had learned the rhythms of the flame, when it needed breath, when it needed space, when it needed to be left alone. Mira had passed into the sky to winters before, and now Tahu watched over the fire alone. But on the night, the moon vanished. Everything changed. It was a windless night, and the air smelled of stone. The stars blinked faintly, distant and uncaring, and the forest that usually crackled with the noises of life had fallen into a strange hush. Tahu sat cross-legged beside the hearth, feeding thin twigs into Karu's shallow basin. The coals shimmered, red and gold. The flame, though small, was steady. Then, without warning, a gust of cold wind burst through the canopy. It was sudden, unnatural, too sharp for a still night. The fire shuddered. A hiss like steam rose from Karu's heart. Tahu leaned in, shielding the flame with his body, but it was too late. The fire went out. For a heartbeat, he did not move. He only stared at the black stone, which now sat dark and cool like any other rock. He reached forward, touching it gently. No warmth, no glow, no fire. The breath caught in his throat. He tried everything, blowing softly, adding dry grass, whispering the chants Mira had taught him. He even struck flints together, hoping for a spark. Nothing. Karu remained silent. When the tribe awoke, they gathered around the hearth in disbelief. Elders wept quietly. Children stared, confused and frightened. Some whispered that the Sky Woman had abandoned them. Others said Tahu had broken a rule, offended the spirits, failed in his duty. Tahu said nothing. He only bowed his head and sat in silence beside the dead stone. That night, the darkness felt heavier. The stars seemed farther away. Without fire, the chill of the valley crept into their bones. No meat could be cooked. No stories could be told. Shadows hung like heavy blankets over the camp. On the second day, the Council of Elders met. They spoke for many hours. Finally, the Chifa, bent, sharp-eyed man named Odorong, called for Tahu. "You are the last firekeeper," Odorong said. "And though the flame has died, your duty has not. You must go to the mountain of smoke, where the old ones say the first fire sleeps. If there is still a spark in this world, it will be found there." Who nodded. No one volunteered to go with him. Before dawn, Tahu wrapped himself in a bear pelt and filled a pouch with dried berries, a water skin, and a sliver of the firevine root. He carried Karu in a bundle of thick hide, cradling the cold stone as one might carry a child. His only tool was a stone blade, chipped and polished by his own hand. He left without a word. The journey to the mountain of smoke was long and uncertain. The mountain lay far to the west, beyond the lands of the black trees and the bones of giants where mammoths sometimes wandered and caves whispered forgotten names. For many days, Tahu walked alone. He spoke to the trees. He listened to the wind. He followed the stars as Mira had taught him, mapping his path by the dance of constellations at night. He huddled in hollows of earth and beneath leaning stones, too cold to sleep. He missed the warmth of the fire more with each passing night. The cold became a voice of its own, whispering doubts into his ears. On the seventh day, Tahu came to a strange place, a grove of trees with silver leaves that did not fall, even in wind. There, at the grove's center, was a pool of water, so still that the sky in its reflection seemed more real than the one above. He knelt beside the pool. In it, he saw his face butt behind him, reflected in the water. Was the figure of Myra. He turned. Nothing. But when he looked again, her voice echoed not from outside, but from within his chest. The fire is not dead. It sleeps where the world breathes steam. The mountain of smoke. Renewed, he walked for 3 more days. On the 4th, he saw it. It rose like a sleeping beast from the earth, dark and cracked, with threads of white steam curling from its peak. The ground rumbled beneath his feet. The air smelled of ashdot. He climbed. Each step up the mountain was harder than the last. The rocks were hot to the touch. Once, a plume of smoke burst from a fissure beside him, making him fall to his knees. But he continued. At the summit, he found a shallow crater. Inside, red veins pulsed beneath glassy stone. Heat radiated from below, not in flames, but in breath like the exhale of something ancient. Tahu unwrapped Karu and placed the stone at the center of the crater. He whispered the old chants. He laid the firevine root beside it, Te, and then he waited. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the root began to curl. A glow soft and amberlit the base of Karu from within the cracks of the stone. A pulse, like a heartbeat, grew. T-H-U leaned closer. The fire returned. Not in a flash, a single flame, pale and trembling, rose from Karu's heart. Tahu cupped it gently with both hands, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. He had done it. He had woken the fire. The journey back was slower, but he did not travel alone. At night, the flame in Karu warmed his path. Small animals followed, at a distance, drawn to the glow. Even the wind, which had once howled so cruelly, now moved like a soft hand through the trees. When Tahu returned to the tribe, carrying the fire once more, no words were needed. They gathered around Karu as he placed the stone in its rightful place. The flame danced. Shadows fled. The warmth returned. From that night forward, the fire never died again, and Tahu was not called the last firekeeper anymore. He was the first of a new line. There is a place far beyond the reach of sun-touched meadows and the slow rivers that cradle the earth, where the trees grow close together and the wind no longer sings. A place where the walls remember. The Uru people called it Kalendor, the cave that watches for generations. None dared enter, but before it was feared, it was sacred. Long ago, the ancestors came to the cave in times of hunger and change. They would paint their stories. On its wall, stories of hunts, of visions, of stars falling like rain. They believed that inside the cave lived the spirit of memory, silent and gentle, who would keep the stories alive when the voices of the people faded. Time passed. and the path to the cave grew over with thorns and moss. New generations rose. The stories became shadows, and Kalendor was forgotten until the night the lights returned. It began with the smallest one. Her name was Sani, only 8 summers old. She was a child of silence. While the others laughed and shouted, Sani wandered, alone through the edge of the forest, listening to the whispers in the leaves. Her voice was soft, her eyes large and dark, always watching, always wondering. One night, as the moon rose thin and pale in the sky, Sani saw something strange from her sleeping mat of woven reeds. A faint blue, glow-soft as breaths shimmered. Beyond the tree line, far to the north, it pulsed like a heartbeat. She blinked. It was gone. The next night, it returned. This time, it danced tiny flickers of light, like stars broken loose, floated in the dark. They circled the forest, forming a slow spiral, then vanished again. She told no one, but the third night, they called to her. She was lying awake, watching the sky when a whisper brushed her ears, not in words, but in feeling. A pull, a hush, a kind of sadness that wrapped gently around her chest. She rose silently and walked through the still woods. She moved, barefoot and unafraid, guided only by the gentle glow. The further she walked, the quieter the forest became. Even the insects stilled dot. Then she saw it, a small break in the stone hill, narrow, low, almost hidden by creeping vines and the bones of a fallen tree. The air from within was cool and smelled of earth and ashdot. The cave, the lights, disappeared inside. She followed. The darkness swallowed her quickly, but the cave was not empty. Faint lights blew. Green and silver moved like mist within the chamber. The air was still and dense, yet calm. As her eyes adjusted, Sani saw the walls, covered in markings. Hands, hundreds of them, tiny and large, old and newer, painted in ochre, ash, and clay. Some were complete, others faded. They overlapped in places, like waves of time touching one another. Between the hands were drawings, mammoths, suns, spirals, trees, eyes. Sani touched the wall. Her fingers rested on the shape of a child's hand, small and slender like her own. The stone was cool, but something pulsed beneath it, a feeling. Loneliness. She stepped deeper into the cave, drawn forward by the lights. They danced ahead of her, illuminating the carvings. She saw a woman with a crescent moon for a crown, a boy carrying a burning stone, a wolf standing beside a sleeping man. Each image stirred something inside her memory. she did not know she had thought. At the heart of the cave, she found a dome-shaped chamber where the lights gathered. They circled slowly around a stone altar, flat and smooth, stained with the colors of ancient paints. There, the lights stopped. They hovered in stillness as if waiting. Sani stepped forward. She placed her hand on the stone, and the cave sighed. A gentle wind, though no opening could be seen, brushed past her ears. The lights grew brighter, not blinding, but warm, and one by one, they drifted toward the walls. Wherever they touched, the paintings shimmered in, changed. The mammoth began to move, walking slowly across the stone. The hunter raised his spear. The spirals turned. The hands glowed softly, as though remembering themselves. Sani watched wide-eyed, and then she heard it, a voice, soft and ancient, not made of sound, but of memory. It did not speak in words, but in images that the cave was alive. It remembered, and it was lonely. It had held the stories of the people for countless seasons, but none had returned to listen. None had brought new stories to share. The lights were its dreams, fragments of memory, searching for someone who could understand. Sani sat beside the altar and began to hum. Not a song she had learned, but something old, something deep inside her. The melody echoed gently against the stone, and the lights swayed with it. She stayed until morning. When she returned to the village, her eyes were brighter. The others noticed, but she said little. That night, as the fire crackled, she drew in the dirt symbols, animals, shapes no one had taught her. The elders watched the next evening. She returned to the cave with her older brother, then with her mother, then with others. They came not out of fear, but of curiosity, and as each one entered, the cave remembered them. The lights danced once more. The drawings shimmered. The people began to paint again. They told new stories on the walls, of the moon that sang, of the wolf that dreamed, of the child who spoke with spirits. The cave welcomed them. Sani became known as the listener, and though she never claimed to be a shaman or leader, she became the keeper of the cave, quietly guiding those who entered, helping them find the part of themselves the cave would remember. In time, the forest around Kalendor bloomed. The tribe grew. Stories flourished, and the lights never faded again. Some said the spirits were watching. Others said the cave had simply found its voice once more. But Sani knew the truth. Sometimes memory waits for a heart quiet enough to hear it. The air was thick with silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence before something ancient stirs. In the valley of Durand, where the snow melted slower than time, and the sun kissed the land only briefly each day, the people of the Curate clan waited. They were hunters, born of ice and taught by the wind. Their lives were stitched together by seasons, migrations, and the rhythm of prey. But now, the prey was gone. 4:30 sunrises, the herds had not come. No mammoths, no aurochs, no deer. The ground was hard. The children's bellies were hollow. The old ones whispered fears into their furs. And so, the clan prepared for one final hunt. A hunt into the unknown. His name was Ranuk. He was not the strongest of the hunters, nor the tallest. He did not speak often, but when he did, people listened not because his voice was loud, but because it was true. Ranuk had seen 17 winters. His eyes were the color of frozen earth, and he carried a spear he had carved himself from bone and blackwood, its tip honed by seasons of patience. He did not volunteer for the hunt. He was chosen. North, said the elder hunter, Tarkin, on the eve of their departure. The spirits drift there. I dreamed of fire among the ice. North meant danger. The mountains there were sharp and silent. Strange winds blew through, stone corridors, and stories told of creatures that did not bleed, and shadows that never slept. But hunger does not fear shadows. At dawn, 6 left the camp. Tarkhan, Ranok, and 4 others. They carried little bone blades, hide packs, ropes woven from sinew. The sky above them was a smear of gray, and the snow crunched beneath their boots like dry bone. For days, they walked. The world grew wider, emptier. On the 4th day, they saw it, a single mammoth. It stood alone in the center of a frozen glade, its fur matted with frost, one tusk broken. It did not move, but watched them with dark, intelligent eyes. The hunters crouched behind a ridge, hearts pounding. A spirit beast, whispered one, too big to bring down. Enough to feed the clan. For a moon, they circled, silent as breath. Ranok moved last. He had no fear, but something felt wrong. The wind shifted oddly. Here, the trees did not creak. The silence was ... listening. They struck at dusk. Tarkun led the charge, throwing the first spear. It struck true, burying deep in the mammoth's shoulder. The beast roared not in pain, but in sorrow. The sound shook the trees, then the ground moved. Not the mammoth, the ground, from beneath the snow. Other shapes rose, shaggy breathing, growling, wolves, but not like any Ranok had. Seen, larger, silent. Their eyes glowed with a pale shimmer of moonlight on stone. They did not bark. They did not snarl. They moved together, like thought, ambush. The battle was short and strange. One hunter fell immediately, throat taken by unseen jaws. Another ran, but vanished in the mist. Tarkin stood his ground, fending off 2 beasts before. Falling to his knees, Ranak did not fight. He stood still. One of the wolves came to him, its fur, silver and black, its eyes deep with memory. It did not leap, did not growl. It watched, and then it turned and walked away. Ranak followed. He moved, past the mammoth, now lying still, though its eyes still open-end into the trees. The other wolves parted, letting him pass as though he belonged. He did not know why, only that something old was unfolding. They led him to a cave, low and wide, hidden beneath a rise of stone, marked by the bones of animals long devoured. Inside, the walls glowed faintly, lit by veins of some mineral he could not name. The air was warm, sweet, with herbs and something else, memory, perhaps. He stepped inside, and there she waited, an old woman, draped in robes of bark and fur, her hair long and white as smoke. "You have come late," she said, voice soft as snow, but not too late. Ranak did not speak. He knelt. The wolves sat around the cave's edge, silent. The woman placed her hand on his head. "Your people have forgotten. The hunt was never just for food. It was a prayer, an exchange. You took and gave, but now you only take." Lowered his eyes. "They have forgotten the pact," she whispered. "But you, ... you remember, though you do not know why." She offered him a bowl of warm liquid. He drank and dreamed. In the dream, he saw the first hunt, not with his eyes, but with his soul. A gathering of beings, not quite human, not quite beasts, standing in a circle beneath a blood-red moon. They spoke not in words, but in fire and breath. They offered thanks to the spirit of the mammoth before the hunt, and gave back part of the kill to the earth. There were songs, dances, tears. It was not killing, it was communion. Then he saw his people dash today, dash, chasing prey without gratitude, cutting trees without asking, burning forests without mourning, and the spirits, one by one, turned away. He awoke with the taste of ashes in his mouth. The old woman was gone. Only the wolves remained. One approached, the silver-eyed one. It pressed its head against his dot, then turned, walked this time. Ranak understood. He followed it back to the glade. The mammoth was gone. So were the bodies. Only snow remained. He returned to the clan alone. His face was changed. not older, but deeper. He told no one of the cave, but he knelt before the fire and sang a song he did not know he knew. A song of apology, a song of memory. And when the next hunt came, he let it butt before they lifted their spears. He made them kneel. He made them thank the spirit of the beast. They would take, some scoffed, but the prey returned, not in great numbers, but enough to live. Years passed, Rannoch became elder. He taught the children not just how to throw a spear, but how to ask the earth before stepping, how to bless thee, river before drinking Dot. They called him the one who remembers. And deep in the north, the wolves watched silent, but no longer angry. The world was young, but the stones were older, older than trees, older than rivers, older than even the wind that sang through the valleys. They were the keepers of secrets, silent witnesses, 2 times slow march. Among the people of the Shara tribe, there was a girl unlike any other. Her name was Ira. She was small and quiet, with eyes like polished flint dark, sharp, and reflecting the firelight like a hidden depth. From her earliest days, Ira felt the stones calling to her, their voices not heard by others, but felt in the deep places of her heart. While the children played and the hunters prepared their spears, Ira wandered the rocky hills, touching every boulder, every pebble, listening Dot to her. The stones spoke in whispers, soft, slow, like the pulse of the earth itself. The elders had stories about the stones. They said the stones held the memories of the world. They remembered the footprints of the first animals, the rise and fall of great beasts, the birth of rivers, and the shifting of stars. But they warned, to listen too closely is to risk forgetting your own voice. Ira did not care. She only wanted to understand. She spent long hours sitting among the stones, tracing their shapes with her fingers. Sometimes, when the wind was just right, she could hear them sigh a low murmur that spoke of things she could not yet name. One day, as winter's breath lingered in the air, Ira found herself at the foot of a great stone, a monolith taller than any tree in their valley. Its surface was rough, carved with ancient symbols and the images of animals long extinct. Ira pressed her palm against the cold stone, and it answered not with words, but with images. She saw flashes in her mind-giant herds crossing vast plains, skies heavy with storms, and a time when the earth was young and wild. The stone showed her the life it had witnessed, and the stories it had held silent for millennia. She gasped, pulling back, but the stone was patient. It told her of a time when the tribe's ancestors had gathered here to mark the cycles of the moon. When they had danced and prayed for the earth's blessing, it spoke of a forgotten, permissive vow to protect the land and the spirits that lived within it. Ira knew, then, what she must do. She returned to the village and sought out Arden, the oldest elder whose face was lined with the wisdom of many winters. "I have heard the stones," she said softly. "They tell of a promise we have forgotten." Arden studied her silently, eyes narrowing like storm clouds. "Many say the stones are dumb," he murmured. "But some, like you, hear what others cannot." The story of the stone circle a sacred place where the tribe once gathered to honor the earth. It had been lost to time, swallowed by the forest, and forgotten by men. "You must find it," Arden said, "and remind us all." The next days were filled with preparation. Ira packed food in a small hide pouch and set off with her faithful dog, Kira. They walked for miles, through thickets and rocky paths, guided by the stone's gentle pull. Along the way, the stones whispered, secrets, warnings of danger, hints of hidden paths, and stories of the creatures that once roamed these lands, once near a rushing river. Ira was startled by a sudden growl. A great bear, massive and silent, stood across the water. Ira froze, but the stones spoke again. Calm and steady, respect, do not flee. Ira did not. She slowly knelt and placed a stone in the water, a peace offering. The bear watched, then turned away, melting into the forest after many days. They arrived. The stone circle lay nestled in a clearing, its towering rocks arranged in a perfect ring, covered in moss and lichen. Ira stepped inside, feeling the pulse of the earth. Beneath her feet, she raised her hands and began to sing a song the stones had taught her, soft and low, like the wind weaving through the trees. The stones shimmered, symbols appeared on their surface, spirals, animals. Stars, the spirits of the ancestors, stirred. The village soon noticed, returned, and the people remembered their bond with the earth. Ira became the tribe's stone whisperer. She taught them to listen, to honor, and to protect. One night, beneath a sky filled with stars, Ira sat by the great stone. She whispered, "Thanks." The stones hummed softly. They had found their voice again, and with it, the promise would live on. Long before words danced on the tongues of men, before the songs of the birds taught us how to sing, there was silence. Not the peace of quiet forests or gentle streams, but the deep, vast silence of a world waiting to be understood. The people of the Anka tribe lived in this silence. They hunted and gathered, moving with the rhythms of the earth. but their voices were few and soft, more gestures and grunts than language. Among them was a young man named Toma. He was curious beyond his years, always watching the flicker of light and shadow, always wondering why the sky changed colors or why the stars blinked like distant fires. One cold evening, as the sun sank behind the distant mountains and the air grew sharp with frost, Toma sat beside a dying campfire. The flames had dwindled to glowing embers, soft and red, barely breathing. He reached out his hand and felt the warmth. Something sparked inside him, a thought, a longing, a question. What if fire could do more than warm skin? Warm the soul. That night, as the village slept under a blanket of stars, Toma dreamed. He saw a great flame, roaring and alive, speaking not with words, but with light. It told him stories of the earth's heart, of the sky's breath, of the life that flickered between moments. He woke with a start. The fire was just embers. Now, but something had changed in him. The next day, Toma gathered dry wood and stones. He remembered the sparks that flew when stones struck sharp, sudden flashes of light. He began to experiment, striking, rubbing, coaxing flames from the smallest sparks. Days passed. His hands grew raw. But finally, a tiny flame danced on the tinder. The fire grew. It was a miracle. The villagers gathered, eyes wide. With wonder, the fire warmed more than bodies, it warmed hearts. Toma showed them how to keep the flame alive, how to feed it with dry leaves and sticks, and with fire came stories. Around the fire, voices grew stronger. Words forms simple but powerful. They spoke of hunts and dreams, of dangers and joys. Songs rose from the crackling flames, telling of ancestors and spirits. Toma listened and spoke, learning the first words that would bind the tribe together. But fire was not just warmth or voice. It was a teacher. It taught the tribe patience, how to wait and watch the flames before adding wood. It taught respect for the earth that gave, fuel for the animals that gave meat cooked by fire. And it taught courage to face the dark and unknown. One night, a great storm came. Lightning struck a tree near the village, setting the forest ablaze. Fear rose like smoke, but the fire they had learned to tame was their shield. They used it to guide the animals away from danger, to protect their homes, and to light the way through darkness. The tribe survived. Years passed. The fire never died. It passed from hand to hand, from heart to heart, and with it, the gift of speech blossomed. Stories grew longer. Laughter filled the air. The tribe became more than hunters. They became storytellers, keepers of memory. Toma grew old. On his last night, he sat by the great flame. Now, a roaring fire that touched the stars, he whispered, "Thanks." The fire danced in reply. It was not just flame, it was the voice of the world. The wind was never just wind. It was the breath of the world, the voice of time itself, whispering across the endless landscapes, carrying the secrets of the ancients and weaving the fabric of life into every leaf, every grain of sand, every ripple on the water. The people of the Larak tribe understood this better than most. They knew that to survive was not just to hunt or gather, but to listen to the wind, to the earth, to the silence between the stars. Among the tribe was a young woman named Nira, whose heart beat in rhythm with the breeze. Her dark hair danced like the grasses on the high plains, and her eyes reflected the ever-changing sky above. From the moment she first learned to walk, Nira felt the wind's voice not in words, but in feelings, in fleeting touches against her skin, in the rustle of leaves and the shifting clouds. Her grandmother, Ilda, was the tribe's oldest seer. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the firelight flickered softly, Elda took Nira's hand and said, "Listen well, child. The wind speaks many languages. It carries the voices of our ancestors, the songs of the earth, and the secrets of those yet to come." Nira closed her eyes, inhaled the cool air, and let the whispers fill her. And so, the wind became her guide. The seasons changed, and with them, the world around the tribe. The rivers flowed full and clear. The animals roamed freely, and the people thrived. But the wind always carried a deeper story, one of cycles, of birth and decay, of the endless dance between life and death. One year, the rains failed. The skies stayed dry for moons, and the earth cracked beneath their feet. The rivers shrank to trickles, then vanished. The animals fled in search of water, and the tribe grew weak and desperate. Fear settled like a dark cloud over the village. The elders gathered in council, their faces lined with worry. "Where will we find water?" they asked. "Where will life flow again?" Nira felt the wind stir within her, stronger than ever. She knew she had to listen closely, to trust the whispers, even when hope seemed lost. So she climbed to the highest cliff overlooking the valley. The wind wrapped around her like a cloak, cold and urgent. She closed her eyes and asked the question burning in her heart: where do we go? What must we do? The wind answered not in words, but in sensations. A shiver down her spine, a gentle tug eastward, the faint scent of fresh water. Nia returned to the tribe with a calm certainty. Some doubted her, others feared, but Nira's faith was unshakable. Together, they followed the whispering winds. They traveled over rocky ridges and through dense forests, guided only by the subtle hints the wind gave. Days passed. The sun scorched the earth. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, yet the wind never ceased its murmur along the way. The wind taught them how to find water hidden beneath dry soil by watching the dance of certain plants and the tracks of thirsty animals. It taught them to read the clouds when to expect rain, when to seek shelter. It taught them the songs of birds whose calls signaled the presence of game or the approach of storms. It taught them silence, how to move without disturbing the forest, how to breathe with the earth once when night fell, cold and deep, and the tribe was weary. The wind brought a vision to Nira's mind, a great lake shimmering like a mirror in a hidden valley. She shared the vision with the elders, and with renewed hope, the tribe pushed onward. After many trials, they reached the valley. There it was, a vast lake nestled between towering cliffs, its surface glowing silver under the moonlight. The tribe rejoiced. Life returned. The grasses grew. Green again, the rivers flowed, and the animals came back to drink. Nira stood at the water's edge, feeling the wind on her face and hearing its quiet laughter. But the wind's lessons were not yet done. It told them to honor the valley, to tread lightly, to share its gifts without greed. Nira became the tribe's messenger, the one who spoke. For the wind, she taught the people how to listen to the earth, to the sky, to each other. She reminded them that survival was not just about strength or cunning, but about respect, balance, and harmony. Years passed, the tribe thrived, and the wind's whispers grew into songs. Their voices carried across the land, weaving stories of hope and remembrance. Nira grew old, her hair silver as dawn. On her last day, she climbed the cliff where the wind first called her. She raised her arms to the sky and let the breeze carry her spirit home. The wind sang a final song of farewell and promise, and so the whispering winds of the ancients continue to tell their tales to those who listen. In the beginning, before men named the world, before stone met fire, there were the trees. Not just plants that grew tall or gave shade, but living, breathing beings with voices soft as the rustling leaves and deep as the roots that tangled. Beneath the earth, the people of the Veiled tribe knew this truth. They called the forest the breath of life, for within its towering trees and tangled underbrush lived spirits older than any memory, guardians of secrets whispered in the green twilight. Among the tribe was a boy named Kale. He was different from other children. While they laughed and shouted among the open fields, Kale wandered alone into the woods, listening to the quiet murmurs of the leaves, feeling the heartbeat of the bark beneath his fingertips. His mother often warned, "Kale, the forest is not for children to wander alone." But Kale could not resist. The trees called him one cool morning, as dawn painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. Kale ventured deeper than ever before. He moved softly, stepping on moss and fallen leaves, his breath steady and slow. The forest seemed alive in a way he'd never noticed, the way the sunlight filtered through the canopy, the way shadows shifted, the way a breeze carried a faint melody. Suddenly, a voice touched his mind, a voice like his own, but a gentle whisper. "Listen." Kale froze. He closed his eyes, and he heard the trees spoke not with words, but with feelings. A pulse like a slow drumbeat, a rhythm like the sigh of the earth, a song that told stories of the wind and rain, of seasons past and seasons yet to come. They told him of the great storms that had bent their branches, of the fires that had scarred their bark, and of the new growth that followed. They told him of the animals that lived among them, the bees that danced from flower to flower, the birds that nested high in their arms. And they told him of men who sometimes came with respect, and sometimes with destruction. Kale returned to the tribe with a new light in his eyes. He told the elders what he had heard. At first, they doubted, but Kale's stories were too vivid, his words too true. The elders agreed to send a small group, led by Kale, into the heart of the forest. There, beneath the oldest tree, towering oak with roots like great serpents, they found carvings made by hands long gone, symbols that matched the rhythms Kale had felt. They called it the language of the trees. From that day, the tribe learned to listen differently. They moved with care, taking only what the forest gave freely. They sang songs to honor the trees, songs that echoed the patterns of the leaves and branches. Kale became the tribe's tree, whisperer, keeper of the secret language. He taught the people to watch the trees' responses, how they bent in the wind, how their leaves changed color, how their sap flowed. He showed them how to read the forest's moods, when it was hungry, when it was sick, when it was joyful. One season, a sickness swept through the forest. Leaves turned black and brittle. Branches snapped animals fled. The tribe grew worried. Kale felt the pain of the trees deeply. He journeyed to the oldest oak and sat beneath its heavy limbs. He listened long into the night. The trees whispered of a strange illness carried on the wind from distant lands. Kale knew the tribe must act. He gathered herbs, roots, and the bark of healing trees. He mixed them into poultices and balms. The tribe worked together, tending the sick trees and cleansing the soil. Slowly, the forest healed. The bond between the tribe and the forest deepened. They understood that they were not separate, but part of a great living web. The trees taught them patience, resilience, and harmony. They taught them that every leaf, every root, every breeze carried meaning. Years passed. Kale grew old, but the secret language lived on under his guidance. The tribe flourished in the forest's embrace. On his last day, Kale lay beneath the ancient oak. He whispered a final thanks. The wind stirred the leaves softly dot, and the forest sang back. Long before cities rose or maps were drawn, before language was carved into stone, the sky was the first guide to those who walked the earth. The people of the Sura tribe looked upward every night, watching the vast tapestry of stars that stretched endlessly above them. They saw not just lights, but stories that danced across the heavens in silent patterns, whispering secrets of survival, of cycles, and of destiny. Among them was Kano, a young hunter whose eyes shone as brightly as the stars themselves. Since childhood, Kano had been fascinated by the night sky. He learned the shapes of constellations, the great hunter, the proud bear, the shining river, and he listened as the elders told tales woven from stardust. But Kano's curiosity was restless. He believed the stars could tell more than stories. He believed they could guide. The tribe depended on the hunt, following the migrations of animals that fed them through cold winters and harsh seasons. But the land was vast. The herds moved swiftly, and sometimes the tribe lost their way. One evening, the sun dipped beneath the horizon and darkness spread. Its cloak, Kano sat beside the fire, tracing the stars with his fingers. He remembered a story from his grandfather. The stars are the eyes of our ancestors, watching and guiding us. When lost, look to them, and you will find your way. At night, a new idea took root in Kano's mind. What if the stars were more than guides of the past? What if they could lead the hunters to the animals, to food, to safety? In the days that followed, Kano studied the sky closely. He watched the stars shift with the seasons, noting which stars rose when the herds moved south, which constellations appeared when the rivers swelled. He began to create a map not on stone or bark, but in his memory, a mental map of the sky's rhythms with patient determination. He taught the hunters to use the stars to navigate. They learned to read the night sky like a living compass. One autumn, the herds moved faster than ever before. The tribe was hungry. The elders, worried Kano, stood before the hunters and said, "Follow the stars. They will lead us to the prey." Under a sky thick with constellations, the hunters set out. They traveled through shadowed forests and open plains. Guided by the silent light above, the journey was not easy. Cold wind bit at their faces. Darkness hid dangers, but the stars shone steady, unwavering as they walked. Kano pointed to the great hunter constellation. "See his bow. When he stands tall, the deer are near." He showed them the river of stars, the Milky Way, and explained how it marked the path of migrating animals. The hunters moved as one, their steps echoing the rhythm of the sky. One night, far from home and weary, the hunters camped beneath a blanket of stars. Kano lay awake, eyes tracing the familiar shapes above. Suddenly, he saw a flicker, new star rising where none had been before. It pulsed softly, like a beacon. Kano understood. He called the others. Together, they followed the new star's glow. It led them to a valley lush with game. The tribe feasted. Hope was reborn. From that night forward, the hunters revered the stars as never before. They learned that the sky was alive, not just with light, but with guidance and protection. Kano became the tribe's star watcher, keeper of the celestial map. He taught the people to honor the heavens, to give thanks for their gifts. Years passed. Kano's hair grayed like the dawn. On his final night, he sat beneath the stars, feeling the vastness wrap around him. He whispered a prayer to the ancestors. Above, a gentle wind stirred the leaves, and the stars shimmered brighter. The hunters who followed the stars never forgot their sky. The constellations remained their guides, lighting paths in darkness, carrying stories of courage and hope, and reminding them that even in the deepest night, the light endures. Before words were spoken, before fires warmed the night, there was water. Not just rivers and lakes, but a sacred presence, silent, deep, and eternal. The people of the Mara tribe revered the waters. They called the great river near their home the mirror of souls, for its surface reflected not only faces, but the unseen truths beneath. Among the tribe lived a young man named Taryn. He was quiet, thoughtful, and unlike others, drawn not to the hunt, but to the water's edge. Each Morning before dawn, Terran sat by the river, watching the way the current moved, listening to the gentle lap of waves against stone. He felt the water held secrets, stories of the earth's heart, the past and the future. The elders often spoke of the river's power. The water remembers, they said. It sees what we cannot, holds the wisdom of the ages. Terran believed this deeply. One day, after a fierce storm, the river swelled and churned tar. Terran saw something unusual, a glimmer beneath the waves, a light that flickered like a distant star. Curious and cautious, he waded into the cold flow. His fingers brushed a smooth stone, warm and glowing softly. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. That night, Tarin dreamt. The river spoke to him in a voice like rushing currents and soft whispers. You who seek the truth, follow me. It said. Tarin awoke with a new purpose. He decided to journey upriver to find the source of the glowing stone. He told the elders, who warned of dangers, wild animals, swift currents, unknown lands. But Terran's resolve was firm. He set out, with only a small pack and the stones, quiet, light to guide him. The journey was long and arduous. He traveled through dense forests where shadows lurked and the cries of unseen creatures echoed. He crossed rocky rapids where the water foamed like wild horses. He climbed steep banks, slick with moss and rain. Through it all, the river flowed beside him, its song ever dashed present at night. The stone pulsed gently, a beacon in the darkness. Along the way, Terran met others, hunters, gatherers, travelers who shared stories of the river's magic. They spoke of spirits dwelling beneath the waters, of visions seen in reflections, of healings wrought by its touch. Terran listened and learned. He grew wiser, more connected. He understood that the river was more than water. It was life itself, a keeper of balance and truth. Finally, after many days, Terran reached a place where the river began, a hidden spring bubbling clear and pure. The air was cool and still. He knelt and dipped the glowing stone into the water. Suddenly, the surface shimmered. Visions appeared, scenes of the past ancient animals drinking at the spring. Early humans discovering fire. Great migrations across the land. He saw the present, his tribe thriving. The balance of life, delicate but strong. And he saw the future paths yet to be walked, choices yet to be made. Terran understood. The river was a mirror, not just of faces, but of souls. It held the truth of all things, waiting for those willing to look deeply. He gathered some of the spring water and the glowing stone. He returned to his tribe, carrying the river's wisdom back. Home, Taran became a healer and seer. He taught the people to honor the waters, to listen to their silence. He showed them how to find clarity in stillness, how to see truth beneath appearances. The tribe grew strong in spirit and body, bound by the sacred bond with the river. Years later, as Taran's hair silvered, he sat once more by the river. He let the water flow through his fingers and smiled. The silent waters held the truth, and he had learned to listen. Long before words were written, before cities rose and fell, before metal shaped the world, there was fire. Not the simple flame that flickered, but the sacred fire, a fierce and mysterious force. Both feared and revered a light in the darkness. That changed everything. The people of the Runa tribe lived in the shadow of towering mountains, where the nights were long and cold. Their world was painted in shades of gray, stone, ice, and shadow. For generations, they had hunted under the pale light of the moon, huddled close to the earth for warmth, their nights silent and dark. Among them was a young man named Ira. Ira was curious, his eyes always searching the horizon, his hands always eager to touch and learn. He had heard stories from the elders, tales of a great fire that once burned in the sky, of lightning that sparked the first flames. He dreamed of fire, of warmth and light and power. One night, thick with stars and chilled by a biting wind, a storm rolled over the mountains. Thunder growled like the footsteps of ancient giants, and lightning tore the sky into jagged white ribbons. The tribe huddled in their caves, their hearts drumming, in rhythm with the tempest when the storm finally passed, and the first light of dawn crept across the peaks. Ira ventured outside, near the foot of a fallen tree. He saw it, a small, flickering flame dancing atop dry leaves. The lightning had sparked fire. Ira approached slowly, feeling the heat ripple on his face. The fire crackled and whispered secrets no one else could hear. The tribe gathered, cautious but entranced for the first time. The night was not silent and cold. It was alive with light and warmth. Faces glowed red and gold. Shadows danced on the cave walls, and the fire's crackle was a song of life itself. Ira touched the flames with reverence. He understood, deep in his bones, that this fire was a gift, a power that could protect and nourish, but also destroy in the days that followed. Ira became the tribe's firekeeper. He studied the flame, how it grew, how it died, what it needed to live. He showed the tribe how to gather dry wood, how to shield the fire from wind and rain. He taught the children to respect the flame, to never turn their backs on it. Around the fire, the tribe began to change. They cooked meat, making it tender and easy to eat. They gathered together to share stories and songs, their voices rising in the firelight. The fire was not just heat and light, it was the heart of the tribe. One evening, a stranger appeared at the camp. His clothes were worn, his eyes sharp and knowing. He carried 2 smooth stones and a bundle of dry wood. He demonstrated how to create fire by striking stones together. The sparks flew like tiny stars. EIR watched. Fascinated, the stranger smiled and shared his knowledge. Freely taught together, they taught the tribe how to make fire at will. Fire changed everything, but it also brought new dangers. One summer, dry and windless, a careless spark ignited the grasslands. The fire spread like a wild beast, devouring everything. Smoke choked the air. Animals fled, and the tribe was forced to run. EIR watched helplessly as the land he loved burned. He felt guilt and sorrow, but also determination. The fire was a powerful force, but it must be mastered. The tribe learned to create fire breaks, clearing brush to stop the flames. They watched the sky and winds, respecting the fire's moods. Ira led ceremonies to honor the fire spirit's songs and dances that called for balance and protection. Through these trials, the tribe grew stronger, wiser. Years passed. The fire's warmth was constant in the tribe's heart. They kept an eternal flame. Fed by generations, it was a symbol of life, protection, and connection to ancestors. Ira grew old. On his final night, he sat beside the sacred fire, feeling the warmth seep into his bones. He whispered, "Thanks to the flame, the light that changed their night." Their world, the fire, became a living story passed down through ages. It was the spark of civilization, the dawn of humanity's journey. Ira's legacy lived on in every flicker. Heart of the people, it was the breath of the world.